Hi, Jenny. How are you doing?
Hello, Max. I'm doing well. Great to see you.
Yeah, nice to see you too.
I'm Jenny MacDonald. I'm the writer and performer of The Tightrope Walker, and that show is on in Galway Theatre Festival on May 2nd and 3rd, 6 p.m. And Max is also on, but the next weekend, right, Max?
That's right. The Heart Ward is my piece, and I'm doing it with my group, Chekhov Training and Performance Island. And it's on in the O'Donoghue Centre, and it is on the 8th and 9th of May. And really interesting that we're doing shows about um, health issues
Mm.
in this, even in the same venue. Uh,
Yeah, it is amazing. I was really excited to read about your work when we went down for the launch. Yeah, unconventional storytelling. So that's something we're both exploring, aren't we?
mhm,
And in my case, I came to that because my show is about my experience of breast cancer diagnosis and recovery. And that's 9 years ago now. So when I was going through that time, I found myself writing about it a lot. And I wasn't sure if that was a therapeutic process for me or if that was going to be part of a future artistic process. But when I came back to those pieces of writing later, I did think there was going to be a play in it. But I thought it was going to be something quite different than what it has become. I thought it was going to be perhaps a circus piece, and that's why we have the name The Tightrope Walker. I thought it was going to be quite a large scale piece. And I decided to write the story for myself first because I thought, oh, it's probably important with such a personal piece that I write it down for myself first, almost get that out of the way, and
mhm,
then make the piece. But what happened was I discovered that those writings became the piece. And as I was writing, it didn't come to me in a beginning, middle, end kind of a narrative. I was getting these snippets, these fragments of memory coming to me at different times in different orders. And I wanted to create something that would mirror that. I wanted to create a form that would mirror the way I went through illness and the way I remembered illness, which was that it was much more about chaos and disorder than about linear narrative.
mhm. I was also ill, and I was in hospital last year. And when I was told after being in there already 2 weeks that I was going to be in another 6 weeks with intravenous
Mm.
antibiotics every 4 hours for
Mm.
6 weeks, that was such a shock. And I thought I'm going to write about this.
Mm.
Me, it really, really did save me, and
Mm.
certainly saved my sanity. I felt,
Mm. Mm.
and but I wrote it as poetry, and um, I decided to do that. I've written a lot of poetic dramas over the years, and including radio poetic dramas as well as stage plays.
Mm.
And I was really struck, and I've always believed anyway, that poetry somehow gets in somewhere that regular prose writing doesn't get into.
Mm.
And which really reflects a bit like what you were saying there. It reflects this kind of going backwards and forwards um, in time, which happens when you're in hospital. And the way, certainly the way I perceived things, I think that was actually helpful. That was helped by the fact that I was actually writing at the same time.
Mm. Mm.
So, um, so it's a kind of storytelling thing, but it's also happening at the same time. So the actors are, um, how you get caught up in telling a story and then suddenly it's happening, and as you describe it. So there's a lot of that involved in the story.
Mm. Amazing. So you have these two time scales going on at once. And
Yeah.
something similar happens in my piece as well, because there are some audience members who choose to sit on stage and they
Mhm.
actually choose about half of the piece that gets performed that night. So it
Right.
changes on different nights. And so
Mhm.
I don't know myself whether what's going to be performed and what's not going to be performed. I know about half of it, but I don't know the other half. And that again, it reminds me of the experience that you're talking about in illness, of this kind of jumping around, time feeling very long, time feeling very short. So, Max, I am curious, what have you discovered in creating and in sharing the piece?
Well, I think one of the things that's really been amazing about it is how it's, first of all, how it's transformed the experience itself.
Mm, mm,
And I mean, I find myself now being amused by some of the things that happened when it wasn't amusing at all at the
yeah,
time.
yeah. Mm,
And also to see, like, because I have four actors and I have a soundscape person as well, as you do too, I know.
mm.
And I really, and their input, like John Daly's input, the soundscape, has made the piece more mythological than I expected. So
Mm,
I
mm.
thought this is primarily about advocacy and standing up for yourself in the hospital. But it's become also a massively important about memory, about childhood memory, about how you, which was in the piece already, but how people kind of deal with memories in
Yeah,
hospital,
it's really
particularly.
interesting. I mean, it sounds to me as you describe that, like the artist in you has met the you who was a patient. You know, it is a
Yeah,
story about being a patient, but the way that you're speaking about it, the fact that you're able to find humor maybe in places that were not at all humorous in the experiencing of them, that to me says that maybe there's this tension, positive tension going on between these two parts of you, the artist self and the patient self. Does that feel?
yeah, no, no, it does. And um, I also felt that there was this kind of, that by making the piece, and this is still going on, and this, I don't know whether this is an experience you have yourself, but it's like it's still transformative. It's
Mm,
still working as
mm.
I'm kind of going, wow, yes, I never thought, I I didn't think that that was such a profound moment. That happens a lot. And how do you feel about that? What have you discovered in sharing the piece?
Yeah, and I think there's something about this piece where I've leaned into something that I discovered as a patient, and I think it's improved me as an artist. I hope it has, which is that way that when you're a patient, when you have an acute health struggle, you are utterly present. Your senses are heightened. Everything is amplified. The pain, the grief, but also the love, the connection, the care. So I feel that I've brought that energy somehow to this performance. I feel more present as a
Hmm.
performer. I felt more present as a writer. I felt that there was less clutter
But
to
it's
work through.
very immediate, isn't it?
Very immediate, isn't it? And it changes all the time.
Yeah.
So again, it's quite theatrical actually, because you have high stakes, you have amplified senses, and you have perpetual presence. And I think it can be different on any day, and it's different for every person. And I'm always trying to be very cautious when I tell people about this play to say it's certainly not, it's not, it's one person's experience of illness, and hopefully it has resonance for other people and for
Yeah, yeah,
crises of
sure.
all kinds beyond illness. But it changed for me every day, and I'm sure it's different for every person in how they experience it. But that connects with something I love about theater, that liveness.
Jenny, yeah. I wonder what you really, what through this piece, what you have found out about what art can actually offer people, particularly people in times of crisis, maybe. I don't know.
Yeah, 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 yeah. Um, I think when we make art or when we creatively engage, we part of it is a process of making meaning. And then
Hmm.
when we find some meaning or also find solace, perhaps where we don't have answers, we can share it. And I think it's really helpful to share a story. I mean, stories exist to be told, and we're all a part of this larger human story, and to know that we connect in some way with other people, even for us to have this conversation. You know, we're both theater makers, we've both had this experience of health crisis, and we're finding connection. We're finding connection in our experience. But I think whenever we're immersed in one thing, like the frailty of the physical body, it's exciting to explore the opposite force, the opposing force. That's
Yes,
where,
exactly,
you know, that's
exactly.
where the tightrope comes from a bit for me.
That
You
that
know.
that that
Mm,
that is one of Michael Chekhov, who is the acting technique that I am
yeah,
most affiliated with.
yeah.
You know, he talked a lot about polarity, and I rehearse with that idea. What's the, you know, you're suffering, but somewhere you're really strong, you know, and
Exactly.
somewhere,
Exactly.
and you're imprisoned, but somehow you feel free.
Yes.
And
Yes.
where do you, you know, how do you, what does that struggle mean for a character or a piece of a poem or the story? I mean, I think this thing about finding a form is really important.
Hmm.
And I mean, we had a very different, well, not a very, but a somewhat different beginning. And I went away one day and I just, that beginning is completely wrong.
Mm-hmm.
And it's written wrong. And
Mm-hmm.
it needs to be changed. Unfortunately, as I was the writer on the spot, I could do that. And and now it has much more of a, what Chekhov will call, a sense of the whole, a feeling of the whole,
Mm.
um, which
And isn't that
I
exciting? Yeah, it's so
yeah,
exciting. We can respond, you know, that creativity is so generative, and it speaks to you. It's almost like this conversation with your ideas, isn't it? You start working on something and then that night you're cooking dinner and your idea says to you, no, no, it actually should go this way. And
yeah,
that's such a wonderful process to be part of when
yes,
you've been in a process that has involved a lot of grief or a lot of loss
mm,
to make something to
yeah,
I firmly believe it's part of what we're here for. We're here to create. It's
yeah,
one of the most human
yeah,
things we
yeah.
do.
I agree. I agree. And it really makes, it helps make sense of the whole experience
Hmm.
in a
Hmm.
way. Like in my piece, you know, you're dealing a lot with stuff, you know, that was very difficult and from the past. To, it really helps you make sense of it. Like
Absolutely.
what was actually, you know, how have I kind of become this person and become
Yes.
this person who's survived all this stuff. People, it
Yes.
gives people strength and
Mm.
resilience
Yep.
and an ability to understand things. Not just,
Absolutely.
you
Yeah.
know, so I'm talking about the audience now. I'm
Yes.
hoping
Yes.
that the audience, I mean, the number of times people have read The Heart Ward and they've said to me, oh my God, that's exactly what happened to me, or I know that experience, or my mother had to go through that, or something like that.
Exactly,
Um,
exactly. And I have the same experience. And that's really what it's ultimately about, isn't it? I mean, we're sharing these stories because other people in their own ways have lived these stories too. And so I think it helps all of us to share
mm,
them, you know,
mm,
to listen and to be heard both is something that everybody's engaged in. Audiences, performers, artists of all kinds, people of all kinds.